Oh,
Welcome back.
oh,
Two idiots going for an intro. All right, you go. Let's go.
welcome back to Idiot Square. Most definitely the most open-minded podcast in the world. But keep in mind, we are idiots, so we don't always get it right. How do you feel about climate change, Roops?
I feel like I'm in a superposition between caring and not caring.
I've been kind of feeling the same, actually, and getting kind of annoyed about the recent big push. I feel like this is the next big push, if not already is, sort of by the media. We've been feeling the heat about this for a while now, right? I think it's kind of started when you started seeing a lot of those windmills, solar energy plants popping off. And then Greta came on the scene, a pawn which they're using, exploiting to sort of push the narrative even more. So anytime the media starts this big push on something, I think immediately, not only the two of us, but a large portion of the population, more people now than ever, are sort of questioning and are skeptical of a lot of the information which they're feeding us. Am I right?
Yeah, I think you nailed that. Yeah, it's like been a pretty useful heuristic now that when the media starts pushing something to sort of become a bit averse to it or call a bit of bullshit on it. You mentioned bringing Greta on the scene, and I noticed I saw just recently that back in 2018 or maybe 2016, anyway, it was over 5 years ago, that she posted a study about climate scientists, calling for a freeze on all of these things because in 5 years we're going to have catastrophic climate change and we're going to have all this horrible shit. And then somebody retweeted it and it's like, yeah, this is why you shouldn't panic about that. But I also do think that climate change, it is a real thing, no doubt about it. Are humans responsible for all of climate change? I think the answer is no. The climate has been changing continuously ever since there was a planet. That's just what happens. We live in it's a dynamical system. But we are definitely contributing to certain things, we're releasing, or we're burning fossil fuels at a rate that, we've never really burnt them before. And we're utilizing resources and we don't necessarily have the recycling abilities that would make that a sustainable thing moving forward. But sometimes you got to do unsustainable shit to get to a point where you can be doing sustainable stuff. So yeah, I don't know. It's a complex topic. I'm looking forward to unwrapping it. But I also just want to make one comment, guy. Mad good outfit. Captain Planet. Look at you. Look at that. Captain Planet for the win.
Fuck yeah, dude. Green shirt, green hat, green light. This is like some
Planet
fake
in the background.
Fuck yeah, dude. And this is some fake Adidas hat, I think.
The best Adidas hat to have.
Yo, it's sick, right?
Fuck yeah. Hopefully the money went to someone else other than Adidas.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, the scammers. But yeah, sorry, I'll let you go because you've got a bit of work done on this.
Yeah, I actually did a little bit of research today. And I mean, this has been an ongoing thing. For me, I've been interested in climate change for a while. But you said something which is a great transition into what I actually want to start with, is that you said that humans may or may not have had a large influence, or you said that humans have had some sort of influence on climate change, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt about that we're utilizing things that otherwise would not have been utilized. We're releasing hydrocarbons into the atmosphere and burning fossil fuels releases carbon dioxide, all that kind of stuff at a greater rate than it otherwise would have happened if we weren't here,
Right.
But does that mean that we're solely responsible for climate change? No, the climate has been changing continuously since the beginning of the planet,
Yeah, that's exactly right. We always go through these cycles of high carbon, low carbon cycles, and it's been going on since basically the beginning of time in terms of what we know as planet Earth. So it's normal that these, we have these fluctuations in carbon, and it's essentially what sort of lead to these ice ages and then hot times and back to ice ages, and the Earth sort of, recycles itself in a way, because nothing is static. It can't be. Biology isn't static, so the Earth isn't static, and that's just sort
the
of
universe isn't even static.
Yeah, the universe isn't static. So I mean, we're literally traveling through the universe as we're speaking on this pod
at a ridiculous speed, ridiculous speed.
Yeah, exactly.
And we think we're sitting still. No, nothing is ever still.
So part of my research was asking ChatGPT some questions, but we have to remember to take things that ChatGPT is currently saying with a grain of salt, because it has been changing recently. It's been leaning left, I would argue. So some of the answers, some of the times, just need to be wary of some of the information. And remember, it's a AI model that is being trained on data sets that we're feeding it. So it can get some things wrong. But so with that being said, just understand that as I'm reading this answer, because the answer is
what? Oh,
go ahead.
Well, so I was just going to say, with the ChatGPT, like you mentioned, it's more left leaning at the moment. I tend to agree with you, but I think the way to summarize it would be it's being retarded by political correctness, right? And you can actually see the retardation happening from the political correctness, and it really inhibits its ability to be a fun and useful tool. That's what I found personally. I think that's what you're alluding to as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So here is my idiotic question: if humans stop pollution today, could we stop the progression of climate change? Is what I want to know. Right. So if we all stopped driving cars, we stopped producing energy, everything just got shut down, lights out, would we actually be able to halt climate change? So while it is difficult to completely halt the progression of climate change by simply stopping pollution today, taking immediate and significant action to reduce pollution would certainly be a crucial step in mitigating its impacts and working towards a more sustainable future. Climate change is a complex issue caused by a variety of factors, including greenhouse gas emissions, deforestation, industrial activities, and more. Greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide accumulate in the atmosphere and contribute to the greenhouse effect, trapping heat and leading to a rise in global temperatures. While stopping pollution today would prevent further emissions from being added to the atmosphere, it would not immediately remove excess greenhouse gases already present. However, reducing pollution can have several positive effects. So slowing down climate change, by cutting greenhouse emissions, we can reduce the rate at which the climate is changing. This can help mitigate the intensity and frequency of extreme weather events such as heat waves, droughts, and hurricanes, limiting long-term impacts. Taking action now can help limit the long-term impacts of climate change. By reducing emissions, we can work towards stabilizing the climate and avoiding more severe consequences in the future. Preserving ecosystems. Pollution not only contributes to climate change, but also harms ecosystems, biodiversity, and human health. By reducing pollution, we can protect and preserve natural habitats and promote well-being of both humans and other species. It is important to note that addressing climate change requires a multifaceted approach. Alongside reducing pollution, efforts such as transitioning to renewable energy sources, improving energy efficiency, promoting sustainable end-use practices, and fostering international cooperation are all crucial for effective climate change. So I thought that was a pretty decent answer, actually. I was expecting it to be a little different, but yeah, go tell me why you thought it was interesting.
Well, it's interesting because, it says a bunch of words without saying a huge amount of stuff. But it's slightly unrealistic. To stop polluting is interesting, because in a sense you can't really you can't live without doing some pollution in some sense. So I don't know if it's about stopping the polluting, and I don't know if it's like, about fostering a better quality of life for organisms and the environment and humans. And I think that the answer to it is learning how to offset our impact, learning how to, like, that recycling is a huge part of it, right? Like, so let's just focus on carbon emissions, right? Like, that's a huge topic. That's a big thing about climate change. And so we're producing more carbon than we have previously by burning fossil fuels and coal and all this other stuff. We are releasing these things into the atmosphere at a much greater rate. Now, instead of stopping releasing them, we should be learning and developing technology to reuse those things, right? Like, if the answer isn't stopping stuff, it's, in a sense, it's learning how to complete the cycle, right? Utilizing the waste products or the undesirable byproducts of this stuff, and then learning how to reutilize that to help us and to help the planet and to help life thrive and survive, essentially. So yeah, like, I thought that was an interesting answer. Like, I was just shocked by it. Like you, I thought it was going to be a little bit more biased, but that was it was a very sort of midpoint sort of state or set of paragraphs. But it didn't say a lot. Like, this is what I've been getting with ChatGPT, is like, it'll say a bunch of stuff. It sounds good, but there isn't a lot of anything in there. There isn't a lot of substance. There isn't any sort of practical stuff you can really take from it. But yeah, definitely not as biased as I thought it was going to be. But what do you think about all this? Like, given what you've spoken to ChatGPT about, given all this sort of stuff, like, what is your sort of lay of the land currently?
So there seems to be a push on to us individuals, right? Like, just the human populace to sort of take responsibility, right? Like, they're sort of trying to say, listen, you need to use less, you need to drive less, you need to use less electricity. And this is sort of to get us used to thinking that, it's sort of our fault, our responsibility. And all those things are good, right? However, you can't expect humans to just suddenly cut back, start using less. I don't think that is actually the right approach, or it is the right solution to the problem. I think it's sort of absurd. So while they're getting us into this mindset, you're going to see more taxes come into play. You're going to see just weird, interesting things start to change, and you're going to be really confused about it. They've already implemented a carbon tax in Canada, which people have to pay, right? And that's just one of the first steps. So as soon as we feel like it's our fault, we're going to be more compliant to paying these absurd taxes, where what the real issue is so much bigger, and we'll get into the pod, because meanwhile, we can make positive changes as individuals. Collectively, as a country, as a planet, there are so many things we could start doing to reduce carbon emissions, right? And there's arguments, I guess we'll get into a little later, but one big example is energy plants that use coal, that burn coal to create energy, right? I mean, that's insane that we are burning coal, releasing that much carbon into the atmosphere when there are alternatives. And one of the biggest alternatives, which was exploding in the mid-century, I believe, where what's it called? What's his name? Oliver Stone did a documentary about this recently. They use it to make atomic bombs with.
Nuclear.
Yeah, nuclear. Right?
It's pronounced nuclear.
Nuclear?
No, yeah. No, that's a Homer Simpson reference.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah, remember Homer works at a nuclear power plant. That's his job to make it safe, remember?
That's right.
He gets the little the water, the bird, and you fill it with water, and it periodically like leans over, and he puts it on his desk, and it does the job for him.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Oh, dude, yo, shout out
Yeah,
Simpsons
guy.
though. That was such a great show.
Yeah,
Such
they
a
nailed a
fabulous
bunch
show.
of stuff too. Quite like savants, really. But anyway, so yeah, it's nuclear power. Absolutely, guy.
Yeah,
That's the one.
yeah, dude. Like fuck, I'm like Homer Simpson now. Nuclear power
Yeah.
is a great step in the right direction. I don't know if it's a solution, but nuclear power, a few decades ago, started getting a really bad rep. And this all started happening during the atomic bomb era because atomic bombs are made with nuclear energy, right? And nuclear power plants sort of utilize nuclear fission in order to create energy, but it's being used in a different and much safer way. But there was a sort of political push before that was essentially initiated by other corporations like the oil companies and whatnot to try and shut down nuclear power so they could continue with their exorbitant profits. And it got a lot of actors and celebrities and singers on board. They had a big festival and, talking about how nuclear power is dangerous and bad. So essentially nuclear power got a really bad rep. It was misrepresented. So we actually kind of got away from that, which initiated more pollution essentially. So the documentary sort of covers that. You guys should go check it out. I think it's called Nuclear Now. And I'm not saying that nuclear power is a solution. I think innovation would be the best solution. Like they're currently researching they're colliding, what's it called when they collide particles and they sort of like harness energy from that?
They're doing nuclear fusion or fission.
Fission, yeah. Is that essentially the same
thing?
Yeah,
that's the gold standard. Yeah, that's the gold standard. That's what they're trying to get to work. And there have been some breakthroughs in that recently.
Yeah.
Using magnets and a bunch of other cool stuff because it's become so hot you can't touch anything. So they have to hold the reactions in place by magnetic fields. And anyway, it's very cool. But we also have a giant nuclear reactor in the that we're orbiting around, which is the sun, and we leverage that all the time. Utilizing the sun's energy continuously. Like plants utilize it, everything on the planet is possible because of that. But to bring back to your point about nuclear, right? So yes, there was a campaign to sort of discredit it in a way and to make people very fearful of it. But it was reinforced by two events, the Chernobyl and the Fukushima. So in Russia and in Japan, where the nuclear reactors had catastrophic failures, right? And because of the power of nuclear, it can be both good and bad, right? Like we talk about this with everything. There is this duality, like if something is sufficiently useful or powerful, it can be used for good or bad. It's the same as AI. It's the same as guns. It's the same as cars. It's the same as all of these different things, knives, really useful, but also can be very dangerous. It's the same thing. And we sort of focused on all the downsides of it. And we got caught in, society as a whole kind of got caught in that trap. Now, if you look, then you can see it's globally right now, there are certain countries and certain regions that are shutting down their nuclear power plants, and they're transitioning into the green revolution. And there are other areas, regions in the planet where people are upregulating the construction of these things. And so even as a whole planet, we aren't just doing one thing. There are pockets that are doing different things. But yeah, it's sort of nuclear fusion is for sure the gold standard. We haven't got it yet, but we do have nuclear technology that can produce, huge amounts of energy with way less environmental impact, provided that the safety measures are in place. Now, there have been a bunch of breakthroughs in reactor technology where they use salt baths and all sorts of different things that dramatically reduce and minimize the probability or possibility of bad outcomes happening from a reactor failure. Okay, so it's all there, but again, it's that marketing campaign that either puts people on the side of it or against it. But I just wanted to highlight you're right about the nuclear bombs. That was a big part of it, and then the Fukushima and the Chernobyl catastrophes that really put a bad taste in people's mouth. And then that was used to continue to poison the nuclear narrative. I think that's, sort of what you were getting at.
Yeah, no, great point, because I forgot about those two very, very important details. And the documentary also covers how both of those situations and how it was due to malpractice or irresponsible
known failure points.
Yeah.
Like known failure points. The Fukushima one was because water came over a certain level, but like, you know, they actually looked at the possibility space. It was a known possibility, known probability that could happen. They just didn't necessarily prepare for it or account for it appropriately.
Yeah, exactly. And I really don't think that windmills or solar panels is actually a good step in the right direction. I don't see it as a good viable option, actually. And here's why. Okay, so let's talk about solar panels first, right? It's not sunny all the time. So like we have nighttime, there's cloudy weather. You're not going to have that. It's not like an optimal way to create energy. It's also extremely expensive and requires a shit ton of land, like an enormous amount of land. That you need this enormous amount of land to create the same type of power that you get from like a small nuclear power plant, for example, right? So it takes up a lot of space, it's expensive, and you're not getting energy 24/7, right? You're only getting it when the sun's out, okay? You need to have immense battery packs as well, and making those solar panels and making those batteries, those are all playing a role in you know, sort of creating more emissions.
Climate change.
Yeah. So to me, I think it's a big waste of time and money and space. And I feel the same way about windmills. You need because you can't put windmills really close together, right? They need to be like half this incredible distance apart. And they're expensive to maintain too. They're expensive to put up, and they don't produce that much energy. And again, you need a shit ton of land. So I just don't think either option is necessarily a good step in the right direction. I'm actually confused how we got sold this idea that was a good idea. From the get-go, I thought it was stupid. I was like, we're going to put up like all these fucking windmills and solar panels? I don't know.
So I'm with you on the windmills. The solar panels, I'm not as with you. Like I don't think that they are a sole solution, but I do think they play a role in a solution. So I think they're a step in the right direction. The windmills are interesting because I haven't read up on this for the last probably 2 or 3 months, but the last time I went down this rabbit hole, there were no windmills that actually, like if you looked at what goes into making a windmill, and then like the life cycle of a windmill, none of them actually break even or end up producing like a net positive in the energy that they were able to harness. Like if you look at what goes into making one, the materials and all the energy required to do that, and then the fact that they're not recyclable, and that now we've got like these massive graveyards of broken windmill parts and stuff that can't, decompose or take a really long time to decompose, etc. Windmills kind of seem a bit silly. There are certain places where I think they're probably viable. Like there are regions on the planet that have, high wind, but even then I think it becomes dangerous because of the high winds, right? Like I think there's only certain places you can put them currently. So they might be suitable for certain types of stuff, but I don't think that they're going to play as much of a role. Solar, on the other hand, the technology is getting better at a very fast rate. And I believe, again, I haven't read up on this for probably about 2 months, but I think the cost of solar has dropped so much now that solar is up there with one of the cheapest forms of energy, if not the most, or if not the cheapest. But again, there's a huge amount of mining and all sorts of different things that go into getting the photovoltaics that go into making solar panels. And then you've got like, the lifespan of those things, et cetera. And I also think that potentially because we have been so, as a society, so against nuclear for such a long period of time, we haven't advanced it to the levels that we otherwise might have been able to advance it to if we'd had more money and focus on developing that technology. I can't remember the exact, I'll try and pull it up if I get a second during this pod, but it's quite a small amount of land mass that if you had efficient solar cells that you could utilize to provide adequate power. But as you mentioned, the batteries are the key point. So with solar, it isn't just about the solar panels and harvesting that energy. Even when it's dark, you can still, not when it's dark, but even when there's no sunshine, so to speak, or there's lots of cloud cover, there are photovoltaic panels that can absorb that sort of the different wavelengths of light. So even when it isn't sunny, there's still light around, and they can actually utilize that to extract electricity. So they are getting better and better and better. But I'm pretty sure it's like not even like the size of Texas. Like you could generate enough electricity. I'll try and find it. Anyway, anything you want to roof off?
All right. So I guess we can say that maybe solar panels is a step in the right direction, especially like if you said, because it's a lot cheaper to construct now. And you're right, the technology will continue getting more like better, more efficient, and probably get to the point where we'll have to use a lot less space to generate the same amount of energy, which we currently are, or find another way to harness the sun's energy, right? I mean, like you said, it's a huge ball of energy. So there must be other ways where we'd be able to harness that energy as well. Can you think of any other ways?
And well, no, it's solar, but it's along the same mechanisms. Plants do photosynthesis, and they're leveraging the energy provided by the sun, through photons. So similar mechanisms like that, like understanding how to take advantage of the fact that we have this giant nuclear reactor that we orbit around. That's part of what's going to help us to survive and persist throughout time. And so, that's why I am a fan of the solar. We've got a lot of solar farms going up in Australia at the moment. And there's a bunch of like unintended consequences that come from that. So a lot of this is, not prime agricultural, but some prime agricultural land and good amounts of land are being utilized for solar currently. And what we do now that need to look at is, okay, well, what are the unintended consequences, or what are the consequences that come from doing that, from covering the ground from the sunshine? Like, the panels are absorbing most of that sunlight and sun energy. So what happens to what happens to the ground and the environment around those things now? So we need to be mindful of that. We need to look at that. We need to look at the consequences of that and think, how can we mitigate these things?
Okay. So before I get into this next thing I wanted to mention, just I want everyone to have an open mind, because this is sort of, I think, a controversial topic, or it is to me at least. But the point that I'm going to try and make is that if we did stop pollution today, it's not going to do anything in terms of stopping climate change. Climate change is going to happen with or without humans. It's just inevitable. We're going to have eventually another ice age. It just is what it is. We can argue that we might be able to slow down the progression, right, if we make drastic changes. However, I'm going to show you why I don't think that's such a viable option at this point. We'll get into that in a second. And I also think, and also bear in mind that all of the carbon emissions that we have already released, a lot of that is stuck and stays in the atmosphere, right? So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to bring up this graph here. So let me find it.
So while you do that, just quickly.
Yeah.
if you look at the cycles of climate change throughout history, and there's some cool things you can do to see this, but you can see that we have had ice ages, we have these heating and cooling periods, and that has led to changes in the ecosystems and the organisms that populate the planet. Now, if we get sufficiently advanced with our technologies, there isn't a reason why we as humans can't control that as well, or have more control over that, or more effect with that. Okay. And I think that as a species, that's what we should be trying to do, is to develop those technologies so that we have those degrees of freedom. So we're not at the whim of the environment, so to speak. Now, a lot of people might say, well, who are you to think that we can control the weather and all the rest? Well, currently we aren't, and we can't really, like there are mechanisms to, but we still don't know enough. We have to continuously keep developing our technology and our understanding and our knowledge so that we can get to the stage where we can start to do these things and have less and less of those unintended consequences, or at least have the sufficient technology and resources to be able to deal with the unintended consequences that might come from those actions.
Here we have a graph of cumulative carbon dioxide emissions from 1850 to 2021. So it's not, we don't have, we don't have data from the last 2 years, but this is good enough for the point I'm trying to make here. So you can see USA, right? The gray part, fossil fuels, okay? And the green part?
And cement.
And cement, yeah. So
yeah, cement's big time.
Yeah, right? And also the green is land use and forestry. So if you add it all up, United States has produced twice as much carbon emissions, almost twice as much as any other country has in the world, right? And this is a global phenomenon. It's not just like, oh, one country is going to reduce their carbon footprint and it's going to make a difference. No, it's not exactly the case, because we have to consider something. Look who is number 2, China, right?
Yeah.
China is currently in a stage where they're growing very rapidly. They want to be a dominant economic power in the future. They're gaining a lot of traction. So who are we to dictate how they get there when United States has done all of these, has gone through all of these changes, building all these industries and whatnot, creating all these emissions. We can't really dictate how China is going to get there too. So you can expect that it's likely that China will have a higher cumulative carbon emissions, higher than they currently do in the near future as well. We could probably expect the same from Russia, Brazil, Indonesia. Germany is an interesting one. Germany kind of, it's a lot lower than it should be. And I think that's because they sort of, They have their energy plants in other countries, I believe. And it doesn't.
Yeah, some.
Yeah, so it doesn't really count to their total per se. And another one we have to think about is India. Look where India's on the list, right? There's also another country with billions of people, and like China, they as well want to have their I don't know if revolution is the right word, but they for sure want to be another large economic power. So we can expect that their cumulative carbon emissions will also increase, right? So this isn't just a problem. This isn't just like an issue of, okay, we're just going to stop using, carbon emissions. No, it's a whole world thing. Like the whole world is going through changes at different rates. And the United States has already gotten, past the goal line at this point. But there are many countries that are trying to get to where the United States was. And in that process, it's likely we're going to see that they will produce and have a much larger impact on the globe. I guess we could argue if they decide that they will use other methods of producing energy and they will attempt to have a lower carbon footprint. But the point is that we will likely see this increase in the near future.
yeah, so this is a good graph, good points that you brought up, right? So if you think about, there's a lot of different ways you can think about this, but I can't help but like I'm into the AI stuff, and I can't help but like draw parallels between the two things. So Sam Altman is the CEO of OpenAI, right? The people responsible for ChatGPT. And he was recently in India. This is funny too. And he was asked from the crowd if he thinks that, like a gentleman from the crowd asked if he thinks that anyone or that people in India or teams in India could, build a new foundation model that would challenge their GPT models, right? And Sam Altman's like, no, they can't. They're not going to be able to. It's going to be too expensive. It's too hard. It's too this. It's too that. And it's the same as with this climate change stuff with the US being the biggest, CO2 producer essentially, and then trying to tell everybody else, they're like, hey, you need to stop that. You need to stop doing this. You need to stop. Like we did it and we realized it was bad. So now all you guys aren't allowed to do that. And it's a similar thing to them. Like Sam Altman's like, we built this big, we spent millions, if not billions of dollars on compute, right? We did all this training and all this compute. And now that we've done it, we've realized it's not very economic, it's not good for the environment and all this sort of stuff. So you guys shouldn't do it. You guys shouldn't do it. Leave us be in control now. We've got our model. We're good. But it's the typical thing with the power structure. Like once you get in power, the US was did all of this stuff to develop its ability to project power. And now that they've got the power, they're like, we're going to tell you guys what you can do. And so again, like you, I don't see this graph changing. I don't see it going down. I see India is coming online. Like there's, over 1 billion people there who are getting hungry and getting interconnected and seeing what's possible in the world. And they're going to want a piece of that. And so they're going to. So I don't think, like we said before, the answer isn't sort of reducing these things. The answer is dealing with strategies to reuse these things. Okay, so how can we sequester carbon from the atmosphere that we've put into it? How can we utilize it in valuable ways? How can we make it a cycle, right, of creation and destruction, like reutilization, right? Like that's, literally all recycling symbols are that cycle. How can we complete the cycle? At the moment, we've got an unbroken loop, right? We've got a broken loop. It isn't completing, right? And we're losing all of that into the atmosphere. And that's what people are saying is accelerating this climate change. So it's about reutilizing.
Exactly. And you made a great point there, which leads me into this chart here. Can you see it, Rubes?
Yep.
So here at the top, carbon
Fossil
dioxide
fuels.
sources since 1850, right? So fossil fuels, look at this, coal, 32%, huge. Oil, 24%, natural gas, 10%. Deforestation is as big as coal. I didn't know that. That's really interesting. And cement and other. At the bottom here, we have carbon dioxide destinations since 1850. So what is utilizing or what is consuming basically carbon dioxide, right? Where does it go? So atmospheric uptake, 42%. So the majority of carbon dioxide is just in the atmosphere. And that makes sense. That's why we have higher levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, right? 32% plant growth and soil, right? Because plants, they consume carbon dioxide. They release oxygen, which we breathe, but they actually consume carbon dioxide. That's fucking dope. And then the rest, 26%, is dissolved in the ocean.
Yeah, so the majority isn't going into the atmosphere, but there is a good percentage, like 42% is a decent percentage. It's not like a small amount. Yes, so growing plants, it sequesters carbon. It really does. Like that's how what makes a tree is part of the carbon. It helps to create the ligands and the structures that make trees. So nature or, evolution has figured out how to complete these cycles. Yeah. And then we've sort of come on the scene and we've advanced rapidly in our abilities to do things. And we haven't fully nailed the how to reutilize things appropriately and create the environments that allow us to sustain or persist long term. Yeah. But we're on that. I think we are on that path. I think, yes, we've been sidetracked and diverted down, sort of less fruitful tracks or dead ends. But I think now we're sort of getting to the point where we realize. With that, I was shocked because I thought cement was a lot higher. Like, I know cement is a big part of it, but for it to only be 3%, that was, that's a bit of a shock to me.
Yeah, it's not really. Yeah, because the graph I showed previous had cement and deforestation as green, right? But I suppose that the larger portion of that green part was just the deforestation.
No, the cement, well, sorry, I could be wrong, but I thought the cement was part of the fossil fuels.
Oh.
It was fossil fuels and cement together, and then it was the other stuff was the green. Whip it back up. We'll just double check.
Yeah, sure. It was. Oh, you're right. Fossil fuels and cement was the gray part. Yeah, I'm sorry. And then land use and forestry was the green part. Yeah, I guess the cement is just a small portion. I'm not really sure. I mean, sometimes 3%. These graphs are
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I know that cement is a big carbon emitter. That is for sure. But there are, there's interesting, novel ways that people are exploring on how to minimize that. So, have you got some more things you wanted to get into? Because I've got an interesting thing that I can talk about regarding carbon sequestering and carbon capture.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I just wanted to make one more point, and then go ahead. Right. So
yeah, let's go.
All right. So the last point that I want to make was sometimes we need to be careful with the type of information that we are being presented. And even if it's coming from a scientist, right? Scientists don't always get it right. And as we know, scientists have a tendency to sort of superimpose certain information or graphs to show information in a certain way, which is telling a completely different story and, not using all of the data that's available. And I'm going to show you an example of that right now. Just let me bring up this chart.
I'm going to show you an example of how scientists use examples to mislead you.
Yeah, exactly.
Global climate change, vital signs of the planet.
So here we have atmospheric carbon dioxide levels, right? And you can see how the graph is superimposed, which means they zoom in on a very specific area, which is from 1960 to 2020, right? And again, they superimpose, they zoom in where it says, where's the ppm, which is parts per million. And if you look at this graph, you're like, holy fuck, we are headed for a huge disaster. It's a very inclined graph. And meanwhile, the graph isn't necessarily misrepresenting the data because it's superimposed in this area. It's misleading because it's making us believe that, oh my God, like this is absolutely terrible, which it is bad, but it's not essentially telling us the entire story, and it's not informing us of what is actually going on. And graphs like this are sort of used to make very biased points when, especially if the government wants to impose carbon taxes, for example. Oh, look how much carbon has gone up in the last 60 years. We're headed for a huge disaster. So there's that graph. And I have another graph.
Where's the zoomed out one?
You want to see the zoomed out one?
Is that what you got?
Yeah. Well, I have another one.
Good job.
Another one before the zoomed out one. This one's even funnier. And again, it's just a little bit misleading. Okay, this is from the last 10,000 years. So you would think, oh my God, that's a huge time frame. 10,000 years, amazing, right? And you can see it's pretty steady-ish, the carbon, until we get to the last few years, and then it goes up immensely, which is, oh my God, we're headed for a disaster. And the line is even red. Red is bad.
Yeah, that's 100%. I was going to say that with the other graph. The fact that there is, the red lines going up as well, it plays into the narrative.
Okay, so great. We know that carbon has gone up recently. Okay, nice. Let's zoom out now, and let's look at what's been happening over the last 800,000 years.
So while Polska's doing that, just quickly, it's whenever you zoom into something, you lose context. You can see at a more fine-grained level, but you lose the greater context. And so it's important that when you zoom in to also remember to zoom out. And you have to take the zoom in and the zoomed out view in totality, right? And and context really matters, okay? Oh, here we go. Good graph.
Yeah, you want to go ahead and read this graph, Rubes?
Okay, so
Sorry, guys.
we got on our x-axis, we've got 800,000 years of data. I wonder how they did this. Carbon dioxide never exceeded.
I think they take samples, right, from glaciers?
Yes, you're right. Absolutely. Okay, yeah. So we can see that the carbon dioxide parts per million on your y-axis is going from, just under 200 up to 250, then back down to under 200, up and down, and it's cycling. There's a clear sort of cycle happening. Highest previous concentration was about 350,000 years ago. You can see that on the graph there.
Yeah.
But yeah, we essentially have this cycle, and that's what you realize about everything in the universe is there's cycles. These things happen. And so if you, I think what Polska's referring to here is like, you can't see mine. If you got a cursor, yeah. Can you just, the furthest right on the peak on the furthest right?
Yeah, this part.
Yeah. So the top peak of it, that up there is what was zoomed in on.
Exactly. It was zoomed in on this portion right here. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And it looks terrible. But if you look with context, so we zoomed in and we looked at that, it looked bad. Then we zoomed out and we realized, oh, okay, it isn't as bad as we thought it was. This is part of a natural cycle, or this is part of a cycle that has happened previously when, we weren't doing the things that we're currently doing. So how much of this is actually, how much of this are we responsible for versus how much of this is actually just part of the cycle that the planet has been going on for hundreds of thousands of years?
Exactly. And I think that is such a good point to make. And it's very difficult to say exactly. I think my argument would be that although climate change is a naturally occurring phenomena, humans have probably had an impact on the progression of climate change. But like you said, we don't really understand how much of an impact, and I don't think we can necessarily say that we've had a significant impact. I might be wrong on that point. That's something that I didn't really get to. ChatGPT says that it's significant, but
take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I'm not saying it's not, but I'm sort of led to believe that, yeah, we had a hand in it for sure. We had a hand in it, and possibly the next ice age will come many years earlier. However, this is the natural progression of the Earth. This is inevitable. It was going to happen regardless. So I don't want people to think that, oh, if I stop driving my car and using electricity, this is going to come to a halt. No. It's not coming to a halt. It's never going to come to a halt. This is going to happen. That's why it is vital that we start looking into innovation and new technologies, like Ruben was saying. How can we harness all this carbon? There is the solution. 42% of carbon is taken up by the atmosphere. So that is a shit ton of carbon that we can use, for energy, for other things, to basically to give Earth back the power so it goes through its natural cycles. But again, that doesn't mean an ice age isn't going to happen. It's coming. It's inevitable. But we should still care about the Earth because, I mean, it's where we live, bro. Like, you don't leave fucking shit 100%. On your floor in your house. So don't do it out there.
Correct. Absolutely. And yeah, it is. It's about developing the technology, increasing our knowledge, so that we have more degrees of freedom over this, right? The other one that I've seen pushed a lot is, don't have kids, right? Understand the cost that your kids, shouldn't have kids because the population is becoming overpopulated and this whole narrative against that. And it's interesting to see birth rates and where they're up and where they're down. And, you know, like affluent, highly educated people are having less kids, whereas lower socioeconomic are, you know, having quite a lot of kids. But the answer isn't to have less kids. The answer is probably to have more kids and solve these problems, you know, like it's like that's a whole nother thing. Anyway, with the climate change stuff, right, with all that carbon that is going into the atmosphere, if all of that is really bad and we do want to mitigate it, there are really amazing strategies to do this. And there are ones that we are aware of, right? And then they have there's ones we're aware of and there's ones we're not even aware of. You know, like there's things that we don't even know yet about how to do this. But if we start allocating resources, time and energy towards it, we can start to discover these things. Now, one that I have come across, which is really quite interesting, the method is called ASAP, so ASAP, Artificial Starch Anabolic Pathway. And it's a project done by some Chinese researchers, and they have come up with an enzymatic or a pathway to take carbon and turn it into starches. And they do this via a series of enzymatic or chemical reactions that take carbon that you sequester from the atmosphere and then turn it into starches. Now, starches, carbohydrates essentially, right? And so that can be used for anything that they are used for. You know, like it's so that's turning carbon into a useful fuel for humans or animals. And then there's other products that can be made from those starches as well. Have you heard of this?
Negative, guy. I've not heard about this. It sounds dope, though.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. So it's taking carbon, turning it into starches. And they've found a pathway to like a series of transformations that take carbon and then via enzymes turn it into starches. I just think that's amazing. We should be looking at things like this, you know, like that's turning a byproduct of energy production, right, into a potential food for animals, for humans, for other use cases as well. Like anything that starches are used for currently can be used for that. You can make alcohols. You can do all sorts of different stuff from that. You can return it into other energy. You know, like there's all this crazy shit that could be done. But that to me is the sort of stuff that really completes the cycle. I've got the paper here. If you just give me a second, I don't know if you want to chat about any of that.
No, it'd be dope, guy. You go to a bakery and you go to buy some Italian bread or some Portuguese bufana, and it says on the package, yo, this was made by carbon emissions released from so-and-so, you know, plant or whatever. That'd be hilarious. Like, yo, I'm eating, you'd be thinking like, yo, I'm eating like carbon emissions. I'm eating pollution. This bread was made
essentially.
It's kind of cool actually though. Like,
right?
Yeah, it's kind of dope. It would be funny at the beginning though. People would be kind of like, what the fuck? Imagine you would just see like a factory on the label and it's like releasing all these emissions, and that'd be like the sticker, so you would know that it was made with pollution. Hopefully that by that point we're not, you know, we're kind of away from that, but
so I think it's really cool. And I think that there are so many of these potential things out there that we just have not discovered yet because we haven't like necessarily allocated the resources and the time and energy towards trying to discover them. Now, like there has been that, but not to the level that there could be. And that's what we need to push. Like instead of slowing down in these circumstances, I think the answer is actually like accelerate. Like it's actually accelerate towards these things. There's actually, just before I bring up the ASAP DAO, I just want to, there's this amazing, we're going to have to superimpose it in the show, I think. But there was a really good argument made against, you know, everyone wants to slow down AI research. Everyone wants to, you know, like stop nuclear, stop all these things that could hurt us. When actually, there's a way you could think about it that says that it's actually in our best interest, and it's immoral not to do it. Like the moral thing is to accelerate, is to develop the technology, because that's what allows us to keep increasing our degrees of freedom and improve quality of life, improve the chances of survivability for the future. Like, we shouldn't do things because they're dangerous or they could fail or whatever. We should be doing more of those things, right? Like, that's where innovation stops, when you're not allowed to make mistakes, or you're not allowed to do things that are, like, quote unquote, dangerous, provided no one's going to make a black hole on the planet or, like, do anything crazy like that. Obviously, there's some limits there, but we could extend those bounds a little bit more, I think. Okay, so I've got this up. I'm going to share the screen.
By the way, I'll just a little nugget. ChatGPT said that 56 million years ago, the ppm, or the parts per million of carbon emissions, was 3,000. So
that's really high.
Yeah, like 6 or 7 times higher than it currently is. So way higher.
Yeah,
than it
that's crazy.
Is. Yeah. So just another tidbit of information we want to put up there.
All right. I think we're going to go into an infinite share, and I'm going to change across. Can you see that?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, cool. So cell-free chemo enzymatic starch synthesis from carbon dioxide. So, little excerpt. Many plants turn glucose from photosynthesis into polymers that form insoluble starch granules, ideal for long-term energy storage in roots and seeds. Kai et al. Developed a hybrid system in which carbon dioxide is reduced to methanol by an inorganic catalyst and then converted by enzymes. First to 3 and 6 carbon sugar units, and then to polymeric starch. This artificial starch anabolic pathway relies on engineered recombinant enzymes for many different source organisms and can be tuned to produce amylose or amylopectin at excellent rates and efficiencies relative to other synthetic carbon fixation systems, and depending on the metric used, even to field crops. So what they're saying here is that this method is getting close to the efficiency of plants, like growing plants. And we saw on that other graph that, growing plants and the soil sequester a good amount of carbon. So this method has almost achieved the similar efficiency to that, all right? And this isn't the exact version of the technology that's going to make it, but this is a step towards things like that. And so I think we should be focusing more on this kind of stuff to learn how to reuse those byproducts instead of stop producing those things, all right? That's the argument I'm going to keep making. Now, this is the cool picture of taking the CO2 at the top here, and then via a series of reactions or transformations, turning it into the useful products at the end, the starches. You can see that graph, guy? Do you want to zoom in on it a bit?
No, it's good. I can see it. No, okay. I'm just blown away. I've never even heard about this. I hope Greta gets, I hope Greta jumps on this and starts promoting this in her Twitter banters.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get into so we can link this in the show notes. So if anyone wants to have a read over it, it's actually really interesting. If you do this, I think it's 27 square kilometers. 27 square kilometers. Yeah, 27 square kilometers at 3-meter high tubs. And I think you could sequester all of the carbon that humans produce every year.
What?
I'm pretty sure. I'll do some more rough math on it.
Yeah.
And I'll include that in the show notes as well. Okay.
Well,
but I'm going to get back to us.
All right.
You go.
Well, regardless, dude.
Keep going.
Regardless, that technology is fucking sick. Like, it looks really plausible that we could get there.
Yes.
And even if it takes up more space than 27 square kilometers, whatever, even if it takes 1,000 square kilometers, who gives a fuck? Like, it's crazy if this technology can get us there. You know what I mean?
Correct. And produce a useful product at the end of it, right?
Yeah.
So one thing that I'd like, you sort of hinted at this at the beginning, and now we can sort of address it. These things like climate change, like nuclear, like all of these fear-evoking things, these things that make people worry and panic, are used to control us as humans, and are used to augment our behavior. And typically, well, I'm going to say in general, that isn't for any individual person. Like, no individual benefits from any of that. The only people that benefit from that are the people in the power structures or the power structure itself, right? Like these big governing bodies, they don't see the individual. They only see the statistics over large populations, like they can't look at the individual because there's too many individuals to look at. And so I just, when you hear these things about climate change and all the rest, try and understand like what's the agenda of the people that are pushing this? Who are the people that are bringing this to our attention, who are saying this, and who's pushing it, and why might they be pushing it? And what I've found is that it's to do with control. And these are ways to get people to fear and to panic. And there's a good saying that fear is the mind killer. And all you need to do is look back over the last 2 to 3 years and look at what fear did to people's ability to think critically and reason and, follow the science. Somehow everybody followed the wrong science, like makes no sense. But these tactics are used for control. And that's something that I think as individuals, we need to become more aware of and not get caught up in these silly traps. Like the answer isn't to stop doing these things. The answer is to find ways to utilize the byproducts that we're producing. Like if carbon emissions are so bad, well, then we should be looking at ways to sequester that carbon, not stop producing it altogether. It just doesn't make sense to take that backward step. If you want to chime in, go.
I completely agree. Like knowledge is power. Information is power. Like just please don't just sit back and allow for these things to happen, or just don't sit back and believe everything that you hear on the news. And I'm really excited about the future, more so now than just like a few months ago, because I see that people are starting to wake up to some of these things. And it's really important that we all continue doing our own research and we have these sort of open discussions so we can learn more and educate ourselves more and, do what's, trying to do what's best, search for the truth, so like, share this sort of information, look into it for yourself. Don't just, sit around and, let things happen. Like we all need to sort of come together and sort of fight back in a way. Like remember, like it's not black people versus white people. It's not gays versus straights. It's not trans versus furries or whatever. No. Yo, it's us. And there's no left versus right. No, fuck all that shit. It's us versus them. Let's take the power back, inform ourselves, understand that we're being lied to, we're being manipulated, and we have to come together because they've tried separating us, but like we've got to put a stop to that. Like all of us got to come together, every group, LGBT, black, white, Asian, all of us, one group, and it's us against them. It's not groups against groups. Fuck that noise.
Yeah. And so when you say us versus them, you mean us as in the people versus the power structures?
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah. Good job. Yeah. No, just clarifying. No, so you're exactly right. And it is. These are people things, like this fear and these divisive things are used to mislead and misdirect and obfuscate, really, like, hide things. But to get people fighting against each other so that they're too busy doing that to actually question these other things. And I think that's the big takeaway, with this, again, do your own research, but be willing to be wrong. Like just because you read something and you see something, don't hold that as like this universal truth. Hold it as something, okay, so that's some information that you've been exposed to. Don't hold it so tightly. There's a good saying about beliefs. You want to hold your beliefs loosely. Oh, I'm going to butcher this. You want to hold your beliefs. Yeah, the gist of it is that you don't want to hold your beliefs so tightly that you can you sort of you want to kill it. You want to hold it like a butterfly. You want to just hold it loosely, right? And be willing to let go of it and adopt a new or more useful belief, right? And it's the same as with this doing your own research. Like we looked at some stuff. Now I don't believe that wholeheartedly. I don't think that that's that's exactly what's happened. But I think, oh, that's interesting data that I can consider. Okay. And then, I can look, and if other stuff comes up that challenges that, I can look at that, and then I can compare and contrast those two things. I can battle them together and see which one comes out as more robust. All right. But if you're not willing to battle these things together, then you can't find out what's robust. If you just hold, fragile things tight, like so tightly that you're convinced that they're right, when there's evidence that if you put it against the other evidence, it would get destroyed, that's not useful, And so, yeah, do your own research, be willing to be wrong, be willing to engage about these things, and try and, again, remembering to zoom in, but knowing that when you zoom in, you lose context, and then to zoom back out so that you can see it all together in that context. That's the really important thing. I think we get caught up as people, we get narrowed in, and I think a lot of the media is designed to try and narrow us in, to pull us into these little traps so that we lose our ability to actually see what else is going on and see it as a whole. That kind of makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely, Guy. Dude, I heard something weird recently that only 10% of recyclables are actually recycled. Did you tell me that?
No, but
I heard a very low percentage.
Doesn't seem surprising.
Yeah, I heard a very, very low percentage of recyclables are actually like recycled. And I was kind of blown away by that. So I thought it was you that told me for some reason.
What did you think it was before? Like, you just assume it was 100?
Yeah, I did think that. Absolutely, I thought that. Yeah. I think it might be a bit. I think what I heard was it was as low as 10%. But like, dude, like, people, I mean, Canada has done a really good job with trying to recycle, I believe. Like, we have those blue boxes, right, which you put outside of your house, and you have to organize them. And if you don't organize them, they don't pick them up, and they leave you like a little like notice or something. And if you fuck up, I think 3 times, then I don't know if you get a fine or something, but they control it.
Is this in China?
What's that?
Was that in China, did you say?
No, in Canada.
Is that what you said?
No, in Canada.
In Canada.
Oh,
okay.
I thought you were making like a dictatorship joke, because like Canada is kind of like.
Well, I'm about to as well, because you get a fine or something. Yeah, like Trudeau will probably disappear your ass now.
That's true. Freeze your account.
Yeah, there seems to be some admiration from the Trudeau camp and his belief system and the way that China does things.
That's right. Yeah. No, I would.
So
go ahead.
You go.
No, I was gonna say I would say Canada's more like North Korea than China, but we could also say China.
Okay, jokes aside, I just had a quick Google, and so there's this website called dosomething.org, and they're about big on recycling. And so what they say, their sort of catchphrase is that the EPA estimates that 75% of American waste stream is recyclable, but we only recycle about 30% of it. So that's in the States, and that's an estimate.
I'd argue an inflated estimate if it's from the same, it doesn't sound like a third party statistic.
Yeah. So, I don't know. It'd be interesting to sort of dig into that a bit. Look, the other thing you got to understand is, like, in the real world, like in reality, things are messy. It's very hard to get an exact answer. You can only sort of really get approximates, because there's so many different ways to view and measure, and errors in measurement and not 100% accurate date, all this other stuff, right? So there's all these things. But it's clear that we're not fully utilizing the power of recycling, right? In the broadest sense, like not just like, putting your cardboards and your plastics together and that kind of stuff. Like as a general concept of what recycling is. So like reutilizing byproducts to complete that cycle so that things are self-sustaining in that way, right? We don't fully make use of that as a species. And I think all this climate change shit and all these other are just distractions from actually that. Like we could, if we allocated all this time, energy, and resources onto that, wow, would we see a different world, and wow, would we have a different future in front of us.
Absolutely, guy. Remember when I told you that one of my pet peeves was when I see someone litter?
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is with that. I just...
Wait, you're Captain Planet, guy. Look at your outfit. Are you fucking kidding?
Fucking right, guy. Captain Planet, guy.
It'd be mad off brand for you not to get annoyed.
That's true. That's true. But like, yeah, like it just, for some reason, it just grinds my gears. And
well, it's a very simple thing.
I know it's so easy. Like if you have garbage, like put it in your pocket if there's not a garbage can around. Like, I don't get, like, why would you throw it on the fucking ground? Like, god damn.
I don't know if you're gonna win people over by convincing them to put garbage in their pocket.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's what I do, but I don't give a fuck. But, or hold on to it. I don't know. Find a garbage bin. Like it's not hard. Like,
definitely. So you bring up a good point, right? And one thing we didn't touch on is plastics. Plastics have been a problem. There's many different arguments you can make whether or not plastics have been good or useful or whatever. But, again, with all of these things, it is what we make of them, right? So we've developed the technology to be able to utilize these hydrocarbons to make all these different things like plastics and everything else. And the fact that we've been able to do that is whether it ends up being good or bad will be based on how we can complete that cycle. So how can we take these things that we end up producing and then reutilizing them and or the byproducts of them to complete that cycle? Okay. So currently at the moment, we've found ways to make these plastics, but we haven't come up with ways to pull them out of the environment. And they have been, if you listen to the media and different things, causing problems where we have large islands forming in the oceans. And these islands aren't made out of, sand and soil. They're made out of plastic. These are plastic islands. This is, large amounts of plastics that are in the ocean because of the way water flows and all that kind of stuff end up pooling together and creating these giant plastic islands. Now, this can cause problems for wildlife, for the organisms that live in the oceans. You have reports of microplastics being in fish and getting into our bodies. We've got the BPAs and the other one, the pseudoestrogens that are turning frogs gay. Alligators hermaphrodite, frogs hermaphrodite, all this different crazy stuff. But they're endocrine disruptors. Okay, and so these are unintended consequences that we weren't necessarily aware of when we first started making plastics, but now we're becoming aware of. And so it's up to us to try and find solutions to this and learning how to take these things out of the environment and then reutilize them in productive and useful ways, right? Because that stuff's been done. Okay. No sense in crying over spilt milk, so to speak, but we should be focusing our attention on solutions to this. I'm all for that. But yeah, plastic related stuff, guy, you got anything?
Well, there was a scientist that was on the Rogan podcast that was making correlations between those plastics that you find in like foods that we consume, like fish, for example, that get into our systems. She made a correlation between that and what's that line between your balls and your asshole? Taint?
Oh, your gooch.
Your gooch.
Your taint.
Your taint. Yeah,
your gooch.
That is decreasing. And there's a correlation made between plastics being consumed and that and or sex reproductivity. Did I say that right? Yeah. So essentially these plastics are having an effect on our sex organs and how we are able to reproduce. Actually, have you heard about this?
Yes. Well, I've heard about the correlations between the increase in these things in our environments and our exposure to them, and the fact that fertility count, like sperm count in men in developed nations is going down. Hormone levels are changing. got increase in Gen Z. Like I think it's like 40 something percent of Gen Z identifies as, bisexual, non-bi, like, one of the new things, whereas historically, from, most mammalian species, it's like 10%, whereas over the last few years, we've seen a rapid increase in that, from, up to 40% now. So I think that these are things that could be contributing. I don't know if there is causation, but there, like you just said, there is correlation. I don't know about the causation. It's, that's a whole nother thing. But anyway, yes, we definitely have more of these things in our environments. We're definitely interacting with them more regularly. Have you heard about the stuff with receipts? Like the endocrine disruptors that are in receipts?
No, like a receipt that you get from buying something?
Yeah, so any of the thermal printed receipts, apparently, like, touching and having them in your pockets and like all, because it's all transmitted through our skin. So it goes onto our skin, it gets absorbed through the skin into our blood system and then circulates through our body. Having interactions with our body that apparently appear to be disrupting, the typical hormonal system in the body. They've done this with alligators in America because of the amount of plastics in the water systems and I'm pretty sure it is BPA. There might be another one. That is, so they like, because of the amount of plastics in the water systems, the alligators obviously spend a lot of time in the water systems. And then just recently, apparently some alligator had like immaculate conception where like just got pregnant out of nowhere by itself, hermaphrodite style.
Mary? She's about to give birth
Mary
to
of the alligators.
Jesus, the alligator?
This is the start of the alligators' Bible teachings.
Yo, maybe that's how Jesus was born, guy. Mary was just eating too many fucking plastics. I want to piss off a lot of people with that one,
guy. So yeah, this is interesting stuff. Like, and again, we don't fully know all these things yet. We need to allocate the resources and we need to look into this, but we need to look into it with, open minds, a willingness to be wrong, and that whole line of inquiry. Okay. So yeah, again, we've done these things. There's no point crying over spilt milk. All we can really do now is look for solutions. Like, again, all of these things, none of these things are good nor bad. They are what we make of them. And we're getting slapped in the face with all of this stuff saying like, God, like, look for solutions, guys, look for solutions. Don't just get caught up getting angry or upset or fearful about all of these things happening. Be part of the solutions. Look for solutions. That's sort of what I wanted to, that's my main meta point about this whole thing. I feel like I'm rambling now, but anyway.
No, I love that point though. Like, that's what it is. Like, that's what I'm hoping that this podcast can sort of achieve, right? It's just like, I don't think, because we're both idiots, we're not necessarily the best source of information, but I feel like the way that we present information is at least going to get people to sort of, think about things more, and then do their own research, and maybe look for areas of research that, might be more, what's the word? Not we're just two idiots talking, but like some real shit. You know what I mean? So
yes,
I feel like we can sort of try and break that barrier, get people at least interested in it, get people motivated to sort of, look into things more, and not just like we were saying before, not just sit around and do nothing, because that's not,
or spend their time and energy being fearful and worked up about this or angry about it.
Yeah.
That's a waste of time and energy. Right? Like, don't get caught up being that way. Don't get caught up being like angry or frustrated about this. Channel that time and energy into productive uses of it. Look for solutions. Be a part of those solutions. Change a bit of your behavior, and then look for things that can change how we utilize these bad things in the future. Another quick one that I want to just bring up about this whole sort of meta point about like accelerating things. and how being too risk averse or trying to be too safe actually leads to massive problems. So this happens around the world, but specifically, I've got two use cases or two examples I can talk of, which is one in America and one in Australia. And so this is in regards to bushfires, right? So in Australia, we've got, good amounts of bushfire. We have a large landmass. A lot of it's desert, but we have, good amounts of bushland as well. And so historically, the indigenous people, the Aboriginals or the Aborigines of Australia would burn parts of the land to attract animals, and they would use it for hunting, right? But it was also a way of sort of terraforming or actually helping the land to become more fertile and more productive, right? Because of the way some of these, the plants or the vegetation works, okay? So the gum nuts are activated by fire, and that helps them seed and grow into big trees. Without the fire, they don't activate, they don't grow into these trees, right? But the main thing I want to talk about with this is the hunting. So the Aborigines would burn certain parts of the land, right? To essentially, destroy the land, right? And then what they would notice, what they obviously noticed was that fresh new growth would come, and it would be sort of bigger and better than it was previously. Now, this fresh growth that would come would attract the animals like the kangaroos and things like that, which would make it easier for them to hunt. But then a really awesome byproduct of that is that the land and the soil and that environment actually got bigger and better over time, more productive over time. Now, I saw it recently. So just before COVID, we had some major bushfires that, were humongous, okay? Now, the reason these big bushfires ended up happening is because in Australia, we've restricted the ability for people to burn or backburn or burn off land, right? So you have to meet, there has to be the perfect conditions for you to be able to burn off, okay? So if there aren't the exact perfect conditions, because it's too dangerous otherwise, it's too dangerous to burn off, then you're not allowed to burn off. So what happens when you don't burn off? Well, all of that biomass, right, those plants, their vegetation, builds up, okay, to the point where it only takes one spark, and then that whole motherfucker's on fire. And then you have these huge fires that are out of control. So in trying to keep everybody safe, ends up creating a long tail risk down the track because we have all of this biomass that can then go up in flames. We've seen the same thing happen in California with the huge fires that they had over there that end up killing lots of people and causing lots of damage and lots of harm, all because not allowed to do these controlled burns because it's too risky or too dangerous to do them at certain times, right? So we end up creating, because we're trying to be safe, we artificially constrain the system. We end up creating these long tail risks that are way worse than those little ones along the way. Okay. And then the next one I want to bring up about climate change is, I don't know how accurate this is, but I did read something about the remember the pipeline that got blown up, the Russian Nord Stream?
Yeah, Nord Stream. Yeah.
So I don't know if you've read about this. I'll pull something up in a second to see if I can fact check it a little bit. But apparently, it spewed more carbon dioxide into the environment than we have over the last 50 years or something like that. Just that one thing. I'm just going to, Have you heard about that?
I didn't hear that, no, but I'm still questioning who, it's not like we're going to find out, but it's still up in the air who blew it up, right? Was it the Russians? Was it Americans? Was it Ukrainians?
I'm pretty sure it was, yeah. Well, they seem to think that it was likely that it was the Americans working with some other people. Right. But yeah, we're not going to really find out. But there was that text message from one of the UK, someone high up in UK politics that was like, it's done, moments after it happened. And so there might be some collusion or whatever. But anyway, why isn't that mainstream news? You know what I'm saying?
No,
anyway, so I'm just quickly going to pull that up.
All right.
to fact check.
But no,
Nord
it's so annoying
Stream.
because the same people that are telling us to use less are the ones flying private jets and blowing up
Correct.
fucking pipelines. So it's difficult to really comprehend or really sort of understand what's going on. Well, I mean, we kind of do have an understanding of what's going on. This pushes sort of to more power, more control, and tax
Okay,
us.
so take this with a grain of salt because it is from, well, actually, it's interesting. This is from Al Jazeera. The Nord Stream pipeline from Russia to Germany on Thursday was pumping huge volumes of methane into the Baltic Sea as well as the atmosphere, as much as 5 times more than escaped in the Aliso Canyon disaster, the largest known terrestrial release of methane in U.S. history. Okay, so it's a lot of methane.
Wow.
Worst case scenario is estimated to be 778 million cubic meters of gas leaked, according to the Danish government. Okay.
Yeah, so it sounds like a huge environmental disaster. Like that's crazy.
Okay, yeah. So methane is a major contributor to climate change, responsible for a significant share of the climate disruption people are already experiencing. So yeah, they're playing into this whole narrative. That is because it is 82.5 times more potent than carbon dioxide at absorbing the sun's heat and warming the earth. Somebody from the environmental group called this a catastrophic event. Anyway, so this kind of stuff is also like interesting to me because, again, like you mentioned previously, they're trying to put the onus on us as people when each of our individual actions is like a drop in the ocean compared to some of these big things and some of the actions that these power structures do, like how did we get putting all this carbon in there? Well, it's because all of these people previous to us had been doing it. And so now all of a sudden everybody has to be responsible for that. And I think it's a dumb game to get stuck in. So let's focus on the fucking solutions, focus on what you can do and focus on ways to reutilize all of these negatives and turn them into positives.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully no one is gonna have this takeaway where, okay, well, since it's just a drop in a bucket, or because it's an ice age, it's inevitable, just might as well do nothing. No, that's not the message. The message is, obviously try and do your part. But like Ruben was saying, the solution lies elsewhere, because we could all do little things to try and reduce our carbon footprint, especially using plastics, right? Maybe taking different modes of transportation, or any little thing helps, I suppose. But plastics is probably like an easy change that everyone can make, right? Buy a bottle and carry that around with you instead of buying plastic bottles.
Yeah, be mindful of your use and reuse, and the more reusable things are, then maybe the better that is. That's a decent way to slow down the cycle of unnecessary polluting, so to speak. But focus on can you imagine if we had the ability to harness 8 billion people's computational abilities towards solving problems, instead of them being wasted on just trivial shit and being fearful all the time and panicking and worrying? Far out. It would just be such a different outcome.
That's a great point.
The world would be ridiculous, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. That's such a great point. It's almost like they don't have any vision. Just lost their vision, or I don't know what, but yeah, it's such a great point.
Well, no, we plugged into the Matrix, and the Matrix's whole name of the game is to distract and mislead so that you don't realize that you've been pulled into the Matrix, right? That's the power structures, anyone that hasn't watched the Matrix, go and watch all the Matrix movies, because it is just meta meaning on top of meta meaning.
Yeah, just don't bother watching the newest Matrix movie. That one was,
oh my God,
was kind of terrible. They should have scrapped it.
Have you not know? It was this meta meaning was still there. It's just these ridiculous fight scenes and just all like, okay, so I don't watch a lot of this stuff. I'm not a TV, like I haven't watched TV in like 15 years, right? Like I'm not a big tune in. I like to curate my information for myself to a degree, right? Obviously algorithms assist with that. Anyway, I watched the John Wick, the most recent John Wick, right? Because,
it's fucking
not
John
really
Wick,
been a big
dude.
fan of him. Yeah, but I haven't really been much of a fan, but I thought like there was some decent sort of meta meaning to the first 1 and 2. I can't remember 3. Anyway, I watched this most recent one and I was like, honestly, I ended up fast forwarding through like the majority of the movie. Like I just could not handle like the ridiculous fight scene. Like this is a new transition that we've got. Like everything has to be more and more extreme. Like, I don't know. Have you seen the latest John Wick?
Yeah, I'm disappointed too. I really wanted to like it. And after I watched it, I was like, fuck, man, that was such a waste of time. Like, I love John Wick, but
literally,
I don't know what it was exactly. Maybe you're right. Maybe it was just, they just tried making it too over the top. But I feel that way about most movies now. Like sometimes I try and force myself to watch a movie that I think will be cool. And after it's done, I'm like, that was such a fucking waste of time. God damn.
Yes. But I think that what's happening, like, so again, with the last Matrix and the last John Wick, is that like that it's got to be this, there's got to be so much drama and stimulation. I think it's because people are becoming desensitized to that because we're getting it everywhere. Like it's in the news, it's in the movies, it's everywhere. And just take a step back, realize that it's not productive to be worked up in these states, to get angry and do it. Like, if you get angry about it, it's okay to be angry for a moment, but then focus on what will practically solve that or stop that. And that's working towards the solution, right? Like problems are soluble. Okay. And they're not the end of the world, right? It's up to us. It's up to us to choose how we deal with them. And so we should allocate our time and energy towards solving and finding solutions to these current problems, not spending our time being worked up about the current problems,
All right. Don't forget. Oh no, sorry. Please do not like the video. Do not subscribe to the channel. Don't share this video with your friends or your family, and hit that "these guys are fucking idiots" button, which YouTube is currently working on, which we should have soon once we get up to 100 sorry, guy. 100 subscribers. As you said last time, I think, right?
So if you think we're idiots, the button you want to press is the subscribe button. That lets us know that we're idiots, okay? And if anyone is interested in the ASAP artificial starch anabolic pathway research or science, or wants to do something with that, send us a message. Focus on solutions, make that shit happen.
All right, fucking right, bro. Love you, dude.
That's a wrap. Love you too, guy. Peace. Right. Thanks for listening. Peace.